Earlier in the show, we talked about President Obama's legacy, and because it is so dense, so dense.
8 years.
There's a lot to cover here. We want to dive back in here and talk a little bit more about his enduring legacy in some other topics that we didn't cover. So in the previous segment, we talked a lot about President Obama's arguably biggest. I mean, anyone, if you're on the left or the right, you can't argue that the economy is better.
Well, you don't have to argue. Listen, I think the Dow this week, for the first time in American history, crossed a 20,000 point mark, and that has everything to do.
How are you going to make the argument that President Obama isn't good for business?
He was great for my stocks.
That's right. There you go.
And my pension.
President Obama's making people rich.
I get a pension. I'm one of those lucky Americans.
You are lucky.
Rich is going to bank on Social Security. Are you saving for your retirement?
I have Social Security that I put into, but I do not have a 401k.
Well, everybody puts into Social Security. We might not
get
that.
That is the extent of my retirement fund.
Alex Lawson would say you're going to get that, but we don't think we're going to.
He's going to make sure everyone gets it. You got to watch out for Alex Lawson. Social Security works. He's going to make sure that everyone who is currently 26, 27,
I paid in
there.
A lot. I mean, I did get my little so if I were, knock on wood, if I became disabled today, I would get like $2,000 a month for the rest of my life.
That's pretty good.
Not really. That'd be a huge pay cut for me.
But you're disabled.
Then what? So my lifestyle changes?
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe not. Okay. Anyway, we were talking about President Obama. So, Richard, give me your take. I'm interested to hear your read on President Obama's legacy when it comes to civil rights.
Ooh. Now, so I think I would argue that the ideal of having a black family in the White House was a symbolic thing for our country. But I actually think I do believe that we've fallen backwards. I think because we had a black family in the White House, I think America has become more divided along the lines of race.
Well, that's really interesting. So I was shooting an event for a client, and one of the speakers there said something that's really stuck out to me. He said that there would never be a Trump without Obama in the White House.
Oh yeah, I agree because I think the Trump campaign, he was based on, those people are like, oh, the Trump campaign was based on white supremacy. I wouldn't go that far. Maybe people will call me wishy-washy, but I wouldn't go that far. I don't think Donald Trump in himself is a racist or a white supremacist. I do believe, though, that in the crux of his campaign, in the fact that his campaign was based on this ideal of division, these groups were allowed, with the fertile ground of division, hate was allowed to sprout itself up. So the alt-right, all these people who feel as though, like this, the people who say this, we're going to take our country back phrase, which usually comes from white Americans. And if you look at my Twitter feed, my Twitter feed is, like most people that attack me on my Twitter feed, 90% of them, the trolls, are white Americans who say the most disgusting and despicable things to me, no matter what I say.
You have the big problem with "Make America Great Again" as a slogan is listen. The only people that "Make America Great Again" might apply to are white people. Does anyone remember what America was doing 40, 60 years ago? I mean,
that's what according to Michelle Bachmann, who I believe is part of this crux of hate, she says America was great in the 50s. And I spent...
Not if you were black.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I spent... I was looking through ebony covers, so I'm redesigning my living room, and I'm going to do them all in old ebony covers. And if you read some of the headlines back then, like, it was a big deal that, TWA hired their first African-American flight attendant. She made it to the front cover of Ebony. Yeah. And that was in the 1950s. This is also an era where schools were segregated. This is an era where lynching was legal. So let's be very clear. The question I want to ask is, when did America not become great as to why we need to make it great? Like, that's a fundamental question.
I would love to know what year Donald Trump was thinking about when he said this year was great America.
Yeah, I guess some could argue that the mid-90s America was great.
He wants to take you back to the mid-90s.
But,
so stupid.
what we're dealing with today is we have some systemic institutional racism issues that we're dealing with. And I think where you see these issues play out most vividly is in the relationship between communities of color and police departments. And I think we've been lucky that we haven't seen another unarmed black man shot that was of an epic proportion in recent days.
Yeah, it's sad that we're lucky that we can say that in the last month
that we haven't seen any. But there is something to be said about how laws are made and how certain people are treated by laws. And the greatest example of this is Florida, where I'm from, but George Zimmerman and Melissa Alexander. So Melissa Alexander was a woman who's being beaten by her husband. Her husband was coming towards her. She shot in the air a warning shot. Mm-hmm. Her husband was not hit, and her attorney. Now this is the same prosecutor prosecuted both cases, which makes it so interesting. Angela McQuarrie is her name, or no, Angela, whatever. Look her up. She's the state's attorney for the state of Florida. Melissa Alexander was charged got a 20-year sentence for shooting in the air.
Yep.
George Zimmerman walked for killing a child who he followed. Right? No matter what we can say, then even in the case, they admit that George Zimmerman left his vehicle when the police told him not to follow somebody because they always get away with it. And he was able to use a stand your ground law as a defense. So I think even though we had a black president who did everything in his power to try to unite the country, right? Whether it be the beer summit that he had with Henry Louis Gates, who broke into his own house, which I understand it, it's stupid, but you're locked out of your house. You're like, listen, I've done it a couple of times when I grew up in my mom's house. They locked up, I'm just going to go through the back window. Yeah. I live here. Being unjustly stopped by the police, these are instances that happen all the time, and I think they've only gotten worse under President Obama, and that has everything to do with the fact that, I don't know how do you explain it. I think the only way you can really explain it, and I don't know, I'm not a philosopher or the people that, philosophize and think about these things and look at the data, but there is a systemic problem. Just like the Walter Scott case, where there's a hung jury, mm-hmm. and he's caught on tape shooting somebody in the back. And the police officer still, he was a mistrial because it was one juror was like, he's innocent. Which in my mind, but it's on tape. Did you see it? I saw it. Yeah, and I think maybe crazy. We have, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm going on a diatribe, but a project that I think I want to work on in the Trump administration, not working with Trump, but I really feel as though we're not seeing each other we're not seeing people in in other people's shoes. We're not putting the Gucci's on the other foot. And that's why we're in this space. I think it goes both ways. I'm not saying police have very hard jobs, mm-hmm. right? But being young and black in America is also hell. That's a hard job.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And just going back really quick to what you were saying about Obama's legacy when it comes to civil rights. I don't want to say he did the best that he could because I honestly don't know whether he could have done more, but his Justice Department was involved. But the big thing that is the massive roadblock that stops all progress when it comes to this is actually much more insidious. And it's these Republican-controlled state legislatures. So in 2016, we don't necessarily, our president is currently black. We don't necessarily have to worry about David Duke and the KKK. Everyone is in agreement that they're insane. The people that we need to be worried about are the people that show up to the State House, they're wearing their suit, they understand the parliamentary procedure, they understand what they need to say without using any offensive language, right. And yet they implement these laws that directly affect people of color.
I think you're absolutely right.
That's where it starts.
It's a great example. One of the best examples of that is in the state of Michigan, where in Michigan they passed a law that forced them to drug test every person. So it not only affects people of color, It also affects poor people. But they pass a law that everybody who is on, TANF or welfare has to take a drug test. And after putting this law in and giving the contract to their rich buddy to do all these drug tests, they realized that, guess what?
No one's on drugs.
Nobody's on drugs. 99.9% of the people enrolled in Michigan's TANF program are not addicted to drugs. Whoa! I mean, it's astonishing.
Yep.
It's a shocker. And that's the only law. It's the same goes for, now I think this election, we're now finally having this conversation about opioid and drug abuse. And in states like Indiana, they've cut money for needle exchange. One of the quickest ways.
Yeah, it's harm reduction.
To slow down the harm, to slow down the risk of drug abuse. So I really feel as though, like, beyond just black people and Hispanic people, a lot of these laws under President Obama, because there's a disproportionate number of Hispanics and African Americans that are poor, right, have hurt poor people. And I think some poor people vote against their interests. I'm not saying the Democratic Party is the way to go, because I think we mess up a lot. And I think there's a prevailing argument when people make this argument, the cities are run by Democrats. Yes, in Detroit, it's a great example. Detroit's run by Democrats, but the state legislature's
making all the laws.
Are making all the laws, and a lot of them some of these state legislators have taken away democracy from a lot of these cities. And let's not forget the fact that cities are also impacted by really bad trade bills passed by Democrats like Bill Clinton. I've said this before. I think there's a Daily Kos video of me talking about why you can't just look at, Democratic cities in a vacuum without looking at all the other laws that are created around said Democratic cities. Right? Crime is pervasive. Okay. You guys are also shutting down neighborhood schools. So how do those two things? I mean, you have to think about it. You have to start. What we really have to start doing, and it's not going to happen under Donald Trump, but I think in the states where we have a Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor, we've got to show America how to run government. So in California, people are going to look to California. We're going to look to New York as places of innovation. How do we create care coordination? How do we really work on figuring out who are the risks to commit crimes and getting to them early? And providing them the hope. The American dream is out of reach for far too many Americans. And that's the one thing that I think if you were to ask the president, the one thing the president wish he could fix is that.
Yeah, 100%.